So anyway, as of Tuesday, I still had 2 plants outside that were still alive, and they reminded me of warmer and sunnier days. And on Wednesday morning, when I went outside to get the paper, they were blasted by the cold. And I'm always so, even though I know it's coming, it is always so sad for me to walk outside and see my beautiful flowers just blasted by the cold. And although I know that winter is inevitable, because I'm a big girl, the final reminder of summer's end really just unsettles me. Just yesterday, I finally pulled them all out and put them in the mulch pile. So Advent is a time of reminders. As deep darkness descends upon the Northern Hemisphere, the liturgical calendar does its best to remind us of the good news that the darkness will never, ever overcome the light. The seed that was dropped in the warmth of summer will, with the sun's light, become the rose next year. Thus, Advent always bursts with signs and wonders and portents of life to reflect this ongoing resistance to permanent darkness. It might be difficult for us to believe that the only real scriptures that the early followers of Jesus, who were largely Jewish, had was what we call the Old Testament. I know I used to think that somebody followed Jesus around with a steno pad and recorded everything he said. The truth is very different. It wasn't until the last part of the first century that literate proto-Christians like Matthew, who received these stories about Jesus second and third hand, began writing them down. His community, and like every community since, has been on an arduous faith journey, trying to find God amidst the darkness of life. Matthew found God working hard in the Old Testament to provide signs of good news that he wanted to share with his community: the birth, the life, and the death of Jesus in what became known as the New Testament some 400 years later. I don't even know, Paul, was it called the New Testament even then, or did it have a name? This is the reason why our Advent journey almost always begins with verses from Isaiah. And those words remain, I don't know, did the rest of you feel, I don't know, a warm glow in your heart as Larry was reading them? The Spirit of God shall rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and of strength. Justice shall be a band around his waist, and faithfulness a belt around his hips. There shall be no harm or ruin on my holy mountain, for the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of God as water covers the sea. And it would be great if we just left it there. But unfortunately, the compilers of the lectionary didn't, and they muddied the waters with darkness. So I don't know about you, but for me, today's gospel story about John the Baptist is more a sign of despair than it is of hope. I found it divisive, arbitrary, mean, and violent. The Baptists shut the door on Advent as a season of light and love and hope, and replaced it essentially with crime and punishment. John's preaching flies right in the face of the good news of Jesus, who had come to preach the realm of God, where the captives are set free rather than beaten and burned. When I compare the first reading with the gospel, I am struck by the conflation of divine wrath with divine love, as if they were two sides of the same coin. They aren't. Even Jesus rejected such an argument when he chose not to join the John the Baptist movement that preceded his. The evangelist Luke, who also wrote Acts of the Apostles, mentioned that the followers of Jesus had to re-educate the disciples of John who wished to join them. But far, far too many have confused the two, including our lectionary compilers. You can't be a sign of God's love, that is, a Christian, when you take an axe to your neighbors and throw them into unquenchable fire, as if human beings have the mind of God. So, what do signs of love look like? As Larry and I were recovering from a Thanksgiving weekend with family last Sunday night, we watched two excellent movies on Netflix. And I'm going to tell you about one. It was called Sunday Best. Well, I grew up watching the Ed Sullivan show. Anybody else watch the Ed Sullivan? I had no idea at all what a giant of a man he was, or what a sign he was for the inbreaking of God's realm back in the 50s and 60s. I mean, he was really the butt of jokes. Even on Bye Bye Birdie, they were making fun of him. At a time when television was an all-white affair, Sullivan chose to celebrate African-American performers on his show, even as the South tried to strangle any movement towards racial equality. As a result, his show was threatened. He was threatened. His sponsors threatened to leave. And yet Sullivan proceeded with a cast of musical stars chosen for their entertainment value, regardless of their race, bucking a society that punished, sometimes with death, as those of us of a certain age can remember, those who tried to foster racial equality. Sullivan provided a divided America a space where Black and white Americans could enjoy music together. So when I was watching the show, I knew nothing about the politics. I mean, I was a kid. I was loved the Temptations and the Supremes and Stevie Wonder, and I was just happy to watch them on TV. However, Peg Devine and I had lunch on Tuesday with two other nurses, one of whom happened to be Black. As I was sharing my enjoyment of the movie over the meal, the nurse Q said to us that when Black performers appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, her family members would call one another in utter disbelief and amazement that Sullivan was showing Black performers on television. So I was thinking how grateful we should be for a man who is a sign of God's love that was written all over America's endemic racism. Sunday Best was interspersed with musical acts from back in the day, and over it all were words of Ed Sullivan. And I think Sullivan's words rival those of Isaiah. I guess that sounds heretical, but you know me. So here are his words, and listen really carefully. Bigotry and intolerance, racial or religious hate and discrimination are spiritual acts of treason. Let me read that again. I think it's so profound. Bigotry and intolerance, racial or religious hate and discrimination are spiritual acts of treason. Today, we've been called upon to search our hearts and souls and cleanse them of unnatural hate and fear of our neighbors. We call upon all of you to join in this great crusade for brotherhood. I'll forgive the brotherhood. Brotherhood means a united America, and a united America is perhaps the sole remaining hope for our shattered world. The narrator of that film said that Sullivan's refusal to allow segregationists to control the content of his show slowly began to change American society. When America witnessed a very famous man showcasing, hugging, and kissing Black people in public, the darkness began to lift, and people began to see a glimmering of hope, as my friend Q attested to. God's holy mountain began to rise above prejudice and discrimination. And today, the public space of television, the popular medium that almost everyone watches, is integrated. So, my friends, like Isaiah and his community and Matthew and his, we too hope for a sign from God that the Most High's holy mountain will become permanent rather than transitory. We don't want those who judge based upon appearances to be in charge any more than Matthew and Isaiah did. We want to see the fullness of peace, as our psalm says. We want the light to pierce the clouds and dispel the gloom that hangs over our land, as we sang in the opening hymn. We want to have the ears of prophets and see with the eyes of saints, as we prayed in our opening prayer. And the good news, because there's always good news, is that there are a lot of people with a whole lot of hope who love their neighbors as Isaiah and Matthew did. There are and have always been a lot of people who have seen the signs of God in the root of Jesse that runs right through the Old Testament into the New and to us. And so we, my friends, like those before us, we can lift up our light and penetrate the darkness however we can.